Even before I knew how to read and write properly, I remember praying to the higher power, asking them to help me be good at sewing. Yet I sucked at sewing all of my childhood. Any piece of clothing that I made for my Barbies was a solid proof that I couldn't sew. And I had stuck to that belief for maybe 20 years until 2020 came. At the beginning of that year, I had secretly wanted to give myself one more try with sewing, but I was so afraid that I'm not gonna make it. Like, I didn't know where to start. I wasn't even sure that I'm gonna commit to sewing or I'm just gonna buy a lot of things and then end up hating myself for not learning anything. I even wonder whether my friends and family would judge me for that. And all of those thoughts were just so overwhelming in my head. But then we all knew what happened. The pandemic, everybody got to stay at home. We all did not know what the future would look like. So I was no exception to that. I was so scared. If anything happens to me, I sure have no chance to learn sewing. But if anything happens to my parents, I will be so sad to the point that I wouldn't allow myself to take up any hobby for enjoyment. So on April 1st, 2020, I said to myself, it's like now or never. There is no time to worry. I ordered a sewing machine, headed to my local market to pick up one pair of scissors, 4 pieces of fabric, and just got rolling. On the first night learning to use that machine, I was so intimidated to the point that I had to say to myself, you just need to do the threading. Like, just get on the machine, thread it, the upper thread, the lower thread, and then we are done. Like, we succeeded, we achieved it, mission accomplished. I don't need you to do more than that, honey. But after 1 month, I came out of quarantine and now I'm a sewer. I can proudly say that because the first sewing project I made, I still wear unto this day. So if you've been thinking about taking up sewing but you have the same concern as I did, this is a sign for you to go grab that sewing machine and start it right now. Maybe not right now. Just stay here for a few minutes so that I can actually explain to you how to start. So today we're gonna have 2 main points. The starting kit and the lining method. For starting kit, as mentioned above, I bought a sewing machine, 4 pieces of fabric, and 1 scissor. I also bought a ruler, a piece of chalk, and some sewing pins. Then I found a pen, a notebook, and a tape measure around the house, so I made use of them as well. For sewing machine, I use a Brother GS2700. Nếu mà ở Việt Nam như mình á, canh sale Tiki. Hồi đó mình mua cái này trên Nguyễn Kim 4 triệu 9 là đã có sale rồi, giá có bằng 5 triệu rưỡi, sao còn 4 triệu 9 mình thấy siêu hồi. Xong 2-3 tuần sau Tiki sale còn 4 triệu rưỡi. Tức ói máu nha, cho nên là canh sale, có Tiki Trading, có Brother Official Store trên Tiki luôn. If you're from the rest of the world, I cannot find this on Amazon, so I'll try to link you some alternatives in my description box. But in general, choose a sewing machine that can sew a straight stitch, can make buttonholes in one step, and can sew the stitching stitch so that you don't have to buy a separate stitcher. For fabrics, buy the non-stretchy one. They're easy to iron, they're not gonna slip and slide on the first day you learn to use a giant machine that was like trying to eat your finger at every single minute. It's just gonna save you from a lot of heartbreak and frustration, my friend. Maybe partially. One important thing, whenever you buy your fabrics, ask the seller whether you need to wash and iron them before cutting and sewing or not. Some fabrics might change in size after the first wash. If you sew them into one piece of garment first, then wash the garment, it might not fit you anymore or it's gonna have very weird wrinkles, so make sure you ask the fabric seller about that. For the tools, I just buy them along the way as I level up my skill. I take on new projects and feel like, oh, I need this. For the learning method, this happened 2 years ago, so I don't remember things clearly, but I'm gonna number it 1, 2, 3, 4 to make things simple. On day 1, I used to thread the machine through a brother's instruction video on YouTube. The machine actually came with an instruction DVD, but who owns a DVD player now? Like who? Who? Anyway, on day 2, I learned to sew a straight line. On day 3, I learned to sew the stitching stitch. It's ugly. It's not gonna look as good as using a serger, at least with my skill level, but it does the job. I search all of my clothes using the sewing machine, and until now, I'm still not naked in public ever, so is acceptable. On day 4, I chose a sewing tutorial that was super easy to follow. It was an oversized dress from this channel. No fit measurement, no button, no zipper, just tracing patterns for my own clothes and mostly straight line sewing. If there's any step along the way that I didn't know how to do, I would search for a separate tutorials on how to do that. For example, I gotta search for how to hem and what is bias tape hemming. The process was messy, it was all over the place, there were no structure and strategy, but after a few days, I was shocked by the fact that I had just sewn the very first dress in my life and it was wearable until this day. I just kept on going like that. I saved all the sewing tutorial I like on YouTube into one playlist. Then every time I want to make new clothes, I just pick among them. Quick tip, for every next sewing project that you want to take on, choose the one that requires you to learn a few more skills, but not so much to the point that you would want to give up. And it must be something you truly want to make so that when things get tough, you have a reason to pull through. For example, after finishing the oversized dress, I could do straight line sewing and hemming. Then I chose to make a palazzo pants that required me to do straight line sewing, hemming, drafting a trouser pattern, and sewing an elastic waistband. I didn't know how to do the last 2 steps, so I gotta search for separate tutorials on that. But since I really wanted to try sewing an elastic waistband, the learning process felt joyful instead of hurtful. And eventually, project after project, I developed new skills, gained my confidence, and gathered a sense of all the basic sewing techniques that I need. And I'm very glad I started that way because for every sewing project I take on, although I always had to go through the uncomfortable feeling of not knowing a lot of things and having to learn them from zero, I'm sure the process would end soon and I would be rewarded with a piece of clothing that I truly want to wear. Had I started with a lot of technical lessons in the beginning, I would have bored myself to death and maybe feel like this takes so long, I don't have time for it, and then just give up. So, if you have the same feeling about learning and sewing, my advice for you would be learn it in a way and at a pace that you want. But there is one important skill that I would recommend as a must, and that is pattern drafting. A pattern is a template from which the parts of a garment are traced onto woven or knitted fabrics before being cut out and assembled. Many sewing tutorials on YouTube that will teach you how to take a basic pattern and develop that into a new style of clothing. For example, if you want to make a puffy sleeve, you first need to draft a basic sleeve that fits your arm nicely. And then you cut the paper open and expand the parts until you get a puffy shape. And then you trace that new shape onto another piece of paper. Like it's raining very hard right now, but I'm gonna continue. So if you know how to draft all the basic patterns for your own body measurement, then you can pretty much sew any clothes you want. I personally learned to draft all of my basic patterns from this amazing lady. I'm gonna link her down below as well as other sewing channels that I think you would learn a lot from. You can start with a bodice, a sleeve, and a trouser. And then based on the tutorial you follow, you would know what more to draft. Once you have drafted quite an amount of different things, you'll be able to develop your own patterns. For example, I came across this very cute dress on Instagram, but I couldn't find any sewing tutorial that looks exactly like that, so I decided to do it myself. For the bottom, I developed it from a circle skirt pattern. For the sleeve, from basic to puffy. For the bodice, I kept the back basic and learned to do a front twist. But actually, I couldn't find any drafting tutorial with a front twist that I liked, so I gotta use another technique called draping. And as far as I know, draping means you have a mannequin. You pin fabrics onto it and shape the fabrics into the garment you want. But actually, I didn't have a mannequin, so I put on my mom's bikini and draped on myself. Like I gotta pray all the time to not have any pin under my skin. But I pulled through. I was safe. The dress turned out pretty cute. That really made me want to buy a mannequin that is my size and learn draping. But at that time, I also wanted to lose weight. So if I buy the mannequin now and lose weight, then I'm also gonna lose my money. So I gotta wait until I settle at a certain weight range first. And also, a few weeks after that, I got into a simple and silly accident. Broke my ankle, so I'm gonna move back to my hometown so that my parents can take care of me for 8 weeks. And then when I could finally walk again, COVID hit one more time. I continued to stay with my parents, develop makeup tutorials, and lose weight. Now I'm still losing weight, so I'm still gonna buy the mannequin. But I really hope to get back to sewing as soon as possible because, like, sewing is not just sewing for me. It has helped me get over my fixed mindset, the number one thing that has made me suffer so much in my early 20s. If you want to know more about that story, you can watch the video here. But for now, go grab that sewing machine and get started today. Share this video to your friends if they're into sewing as well. Give it a like so that YouTube will ship it to other people just like you and me. Subscribe for more content like this in the future. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll see you in my next video. But now, go grab that sewing machine.